Cultural Difference and Identity by Meg Cloake. This presentation is cut into two parts. Part 1, Intro and Discussion. Part 2, 4 Focus Questions. Part 1 discusses the issue of cultural diversity and inclusive education and how it affects teaching and learning. Part 2 asks what the implications of the issue are at the macro and local level, and how these issues are relevant and important to me personally as a teacher, and how I will change my teaching strategies and pedagogy to cater for all learners. Australia is one of the most culturally diverse countries on the planet, with Aborigines inhabiting the land some 50 to 70,000 years ago. British then settled in 1787, and then waves of migration continued to pour through our golden soil, throughout the gold rush, through the war, and even today. Australia is a mixing pot of cultures. Over 20% of Australians are born overseas, and half of the population have a parent born overseas. There are over 1/5 of Australians who speak a language other than English, and there are over 200 languages spoken nationwide. Unfortunately, though, our education system does not adequately cater for this cultural diversity. Australia has a history of assimilating ethnic diversity into Anglo-Australian culture. Lingering negative ideologies of assimilation rather than cultural inclusion still linger and can unfortunately lead to racism in our society. It is imperative that we as teachers help shape our education system, which is a powerful site of cultural transmission, to celebrate diversity and teach cross-cultural respect. Australia's education system is both a product and a perpetuator of culture. Altazer's 1994 State Apparatus essay explains that schools are a tool through which ideology is created in students. Apple 1976 similarly states that schools are a social apparatus teaching students norms, values, and dispositions. As it is white males that head most of our institutions, including our Catholic and capitalist educational sector, it has been the voice of white Australia that has led and bled through our curricula and social teachings throughout the years. Through cultural selection and omission, i.e. choosing what is included in the curriculum and what is not, Australia continues its ugly tradition, albeit much more subtly, of assimilating people of different races and ethnic backgrounds into Anglo-Australia. A shift towards celebrating multiculturalism and diversity through inclusive education continues to be pushed for in modern times. This here is a diagram showing the relationship between social class, gender, and cultural identity from Welch and colleagues 2018. It displays a multi-level approach to status, money, power, and wealth, ultimately inferring that white men are at the top of the multi-level hierarchy and that ethnic groups fall below this ruling capitalist class, after women, of course. By allowing the rates of learning a second language in secondary schools to drop by about 30% in the last 40 years, Australia's education system has explicitly decreed, rather implicitly, that languages and understanding different cultures is not of high importance. Welch et al., 2018. Language is the expression of culture. Language directs and expresses thoughts, beliefs, and identity, and bilingual learners have reported that they think differently when they're thinking in a different language in their mind. Lambert, 1973. Language, therefore, is the expression of culture, and culture is the foundation of self-identity. Migrant students often report that the Australian curriculum does not reflect their ideologies, views, and knowledge. They report that the curriculum does not represent them. Emotionally feeling unrepresented in normal culture can lead to feelings of not belonging, rejection, or being left out. According to Bond and colleagues 2007, perceptions of not belonging can be a major cause of academic disengagement, dropout, and depression amongst adolescents. This is evident in data from Australian students of Maltese, Arabic, Turkish, and Pacific Islanders descent, who are on average performing lower than the Australian standard, Cruikshank, 2003. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, the first people of the land, are also on average performing subpar academically. How can our education system be better shaped to benefit these learners and close the academic gap? Is it our education system failing these children, or is it our society? Is it both? Certain Chinese, Southeast Asian, Greek, and Jewish communities have surpassed national academic averages. And yet, despite their higher education and highly skilled nature, they are often discriminated against when it comes to securing jobs. In 2016, it was discovered that there was a widespread exploitation of international students, in Australia, with 60 to 80% of migrant workers forced to work for pay, half that of the minimum wage. As schools play a major role in shaping culture and social ideologies, beliefs and practices, it is imperative, therefore, that societal change and inclusive education are optimistically renewed at a grassroots level in our Australian schools. This leads to part 2 of the presentation, the 4 focus questions. Question 1. How can we as teachers help create an education system that benefits all children? Some theorists suggest that learning the second language in high school should be mandatory, or at the very least, the study of languages should be more readily promoted and encouraged in schools. Government funding increases could and should allow for better resources and potentially more real-life interactions, more experiences, trips, immersions out of and into schools with and around different cultures. Travel overseas can be difficult and expensive, but there are plenty of French, Polynesian, Filipino, Greek and Islamic communities, for example, living right here in our suburbs and cities that students could visit and learn from. Languages, like other arts, should be given more weighting in assessment to equal that of other subjects. As Welch and colleagues 2018 and Klein 2005 state, Australia is treating languages at best as a luxury and not a necessity, and at worst, a diversion from more important things, e.g. physics and maths, which are subjects more important to monolingual speakers. The promotion of languages at schools could help students from different linguistic backgrounds be heard, seen, represented, and valued, helping change the Australian curriculum to be experienced not just as a product of Anglo-Australia, but as a document and policy in alignment with cross-cultural inclusiveness and integration. All students should benefit from learning about and learning from different cultures. Bilingualism also widely opens more gateways for opportunities for international trade and relations, helping to move Australia forward into our future. Question 2. How can policy, pedagogy, and teaching strategies be shaped to best include international and migrant students, as well as adding more language studies to the curriculum, altering uniform policy to include traditional and cultural dress, such as the hijab is popular policy. As well as this, the Australian government should and could provide funding to extra programs facilitating learning English as a second language. As Hyde, Carpenter, and Conway 2010 explain, the one-on-one interaction, which so encourages first language acquisition, cannot easily be replicated in a classroom of 25 students. Therefore, additional English programs are needed in schools. Since the 1970s, the Australian federal and state governments have produced multiple multicultural education policies. A core tenet of Multicultural Australia is to maintain and develop culturally and linguistically inclusive learning environments, DEXA 1996. However, sadly, it appears when Australia has outreached its hand in past decades to better understand its Asian neighbours, for example, they did so for commercial and industrial gain. Question 3. How can we create a culturally inclusive education system at the macro level and the local level? At the macro level, in order for Australia to be truly culturally inclusive, anti-racism education must begin at the grassroots level, every day in everyday schools. Australia's anti-racism policies emphasise the role of schools and their teachers and principals and staff on taking racism, harassment and bullying of ethnic minorities seriously. It is educators' responsibilities to monitor practices and policies in their school to ensure difference is accepted and respected and that all matters otherwise are dealt with promptly and fairly. Disciplinary action and compassion education helps fulfill another Australian tenet of multiculturalism. 2. Achieve unity in diversity, and to allow for the existence of shared democratic values for all Australians. DEXA 1996. At the local level, when hiring teachers, research shows that the most effective teachers in inclusive education are those without prejudice, but instead with compassion and open-mindedness. According to Mills and Ballantyne 2010, schools, especially those with a focus on multicultural education, should look to hire teachers with the three following traits: openness, self-awareness, and commitment to social justice. Teachers who are naturally open, aware, and fair are receptive and open to other people's ideas, arguments, and differences. Self-awareness and self-reflection allows them to be aware and critical of their own beliefs, values, and attitudes, and how they affect teaching and learning. A commitment to equity, equality, and social justice in the classroom can then positively filter out from a modeling teacher to a student, out into the playground, out into the school, out into the home, to the community, and to the larger world and society as a whole. Teachers are extremely important role models and can shape a child's mind to see the richness and benefits of diversity, rather than to see the paralyzing fear of the other. Question 4. How will I, personally, as a teacher, create an inclusive classroom that collectively and individually benefits all students? As a teacher, I plan to add everyday rituals, routines, and pedagogical practice tweaks to my teacher's toolbox to help promote and celebrate diversity in my inclusive classroom. Firstly, I will enrich my pedagogical practice with collaborative and cooperative learning, especially pair work, as it has been shown that speakers of English as a second language often benefit, attaining more meaning from one-to-one interaction rather than larger group settings. To foster belonging, integration will be important in my inclusive classroom. The more I can mix everyone around to work with each other in small groups and bond with each other with a shared goal in mind, the better. My everyday rituals and routines will include, for example, simple concepts such as singing a hello and goodbye song in different languages every day, just so that everybody feels welcome at the start of class and to get them ready to engage and concentrate in their work. If possible, I will display around the room artworks, flags, clothing, photographs, and text from different cultures, especially from the countries of the students I am teaching. I will integrate second languages into the classroom by asking students to answer in their native tongue and then translate into English. This will be interesting when learning Shakespeare in English, for example, to notice how rhyme and meter affect the reading. Possibly analyzing meaning to see if it is lost or altered when translated into another language will help pique the curiosity of young learners. As a teacher, I will take a student-centered approach to learning, whereby I will start exploring the zone of proximal development from where a student is, and then build on this in reference to the student's skills and needs. When asking questions, I will give longer time for international students to answer and be comfortable with the silence. This will help create a safe space where all students are not afraid of failing, growing, and trying again. As well as encouraging communication and one-on-one interaction, I will also use clear and concise language and instructions, provide more thinking time and processing time in class, and use visual aids to help with understanding. I will use clear body language and ensure students understand what I am teaching before moving on. As Hyde, Carpenter, and Conway 2010 note, language is not simply encoded in words, but also in tone, pace, rhythm, and intonation. I will therefore regularly monitor diverse learners to ensure they have grasped concepts and objectives, finding simple and quick ways to test their understanding before I move on. In conclusion, Australia is a land rich and free and full of diversity. Yet we must avoid complacency when it comes to cultural integration and celebration. Teachers should make inclusive learning a priority and help shift the sociological perspective of different as bad, to instead shift it towards positivity, helping children to see diversity as an enriching and informative delicacy of life. National and local efforts must be made to fund inclusive education programs and push for better language programs across the nation. And we, as pre-service teachers, can start right now personally planning how we are going to create an inclusive classroom. Thank you for listening.